Greetings, my people. Stephen Hutchinson here with your 15-minute money class. So today, this money class is sponsored by Power Tax Ltd. And I'm going to present the cash flow quadrant as was taught and as is taught by Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm also going to discuss cost and value, right? How much something costs and what is its value. I'm also going to discuss tax strategy in general. Okay, so let's get rolling here. There are 4 quadrants, as you can see, the cash flow quadrant. These quadrants are the 4 different ways generally in which people acquire money, in which people attain money, in which people accumulate money, in which people try to master money, right? 4 different quadrants, or 4 different approaches, 4 different mindsets, 4 different relationships with money. One being the employee, the other on the left side of quadrant is the self-employed, or also known as the solo entrepreneur, right? Self-employed or sole proprietor or solo actor. Then on the right side of the quadrant, you have the business owner and the investor. Okay, so we can see here that we have the left side of the quadrant, right? This is the left side of the quadrant, and this is the right side of the quadrant. Okay, so the left side, sometimes referred to as the wrong side. It's not technically wrong, but you'll see what I'm saying. The left side of the quadrant, the right side of the quadrant. So one of the things that we want to do is understand, where are we in relation to this quadrant? Are we employees? Are we self-employed? Are we business owners? Or are we investors? Now, I will explain and admit that for years and decades of doing business, I always thought of myself. I thought of myself as being a business owner. That's what I thought. I was actually soon to learn that I was not a business owner. Actually, I was self-employed. But I didn't know the difference between the two. And there are massive differences and there are subtle differences. But typically, most of us come from and we are trained to be in this quadrant as employees. The great majority of people are employees, right? Now, actually, considering that approximately, 95% of people in general are on the left side of the quadrant, okay? Which means approximately 5% of the population are on the right side of the quadrant, right? Now, there are some important distinctions and differences of the mindsets of those in each quadrant. And this is important because it helps us to understand where we are, why we are there, and what our potential is, what our limitations are, and what adjustments we need to make, if any, so we can reach the quadrant or the mix of quadrants that we want. Because in reality, one doesn't have to be exclusively in one quadrant. One can be an employee and can be self-employed, right? You can have a job and have a home-based business. A home-based business means you are self-employed. Having a job, getting a W-2 means you are an employee. So you can do both. Similarly, you can be an employee who invests in the stock market, right? Or invest in real estate, or invest in the FX markets, right? Or invest in your own ventures. So you can be an employee and be an investor, and or you can be an employee and be self-employed. And you can also be an employee and be a business owner. It is possible, okay? So it's important that we do exactly what it is we want to do. Do we just want to be an employee? If that is so, well, this quadrant will predominantly satisfy us. Now, if we're only employees, though, it does limit a great degree our economic development, our financial ascension, right? Because typically speaking, no one has become wealthy by simply being an employee. No one has attained financial independence strictly by being an employee. And of course, there are exceptions to every rule, but typically the rule is if you want to become wealthy, or any wealthy person that you may know of, that you just have knowledge of, do a little bit of research and you'll see chances are they became wealthy by either being a business owner or an investor, right? Now, of course, we also know there are like celebrities and athletes who also become wealthy, and they are not necessarily business owners or investors. They are more like self-employed personalities, and they can also become wealthy. But we also know that many people who become wealthy or attain a lot of income in this quadrant of being self-employed, like attorneys, entertainers, doctors, also can lose their financial position because it doesn't make you wealthy by being self-employed. Typically speaking, in order for people in this quadrant or in this quadrant to become financially independent, which means they reach a stage of life where they no longer have to work at all, is typically because they become very good investors or they become owners of very successful businesses. Okay? Now, because look at this, 95% of the population, right? 95% of, typically speaking, are on the left side of quadrant. 5% are on the right side of quadrant. So let me ask you this question. Question is, have you heard of the 1%? Right? So there's like the 99% and the 1%. Let me ask you this question. What side of the quadrant do you think the 1% is on? Okay? Do you think the 1% are employees? Or do you think, they are self-employed? Do you think they are business owners? Do you think they are investors? So use your own knowledge, experience, education, and research to understand that those who attain these positions of great wealth and generational wealth are typically on the right side of the quadrant. Okay, so let me just clear this up a little bit here. Okay, right? So these are the 4 quadrants, right? These are some things that we can understand here. Now, this these four quadrants, there are some distinctions, important distinctions between them as far as the mindset is concerned also. Okay, so that's important to understand, the mindset and the mentality of each of the quadrants in general, right, are that employees are typically seeking what? They're seeking security, typically speaking. Most employees are seeking security, right? Job security, right? You've heard of that before? Ever heard of that? Job security, right? They're seeking security. They want to be safe. Employees are seeking safe, reliable, predictable, right? They want their income to be predictable, right? And they want it to be reliable, and they want it to be safe, right? That's the general psychology, right, of the employee. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule, as I mentioned, but that's general. Whereas the self-employed are seeking more independence, right? The self-employed, they want to be independent. They want to do it their way, right? I did it my way. Do it my way, right? They are seeking, to be the super, controller. Self-employed people also seek, yes, they seek control, right? They want to control their situation. They want to control when they work, when they don't work. They want to control their income. So they have more control here. Then they also can control how they earn their money. They can control how often they work. They can control if they work with others or not, if they're just going to work alone. So they are typically, psychologically, searching for control. They want independence. They want to do it their own way. They want to be independent. They don't want to be dependent upon an employer, right? Because in the E quadrant, you're dependent upon your employer. You're dependent upon the employer for guidance, dependent on the employer for impetus, for motivation, for bonuses, and so many things, right? So now, whereas a business owner primarily is seeking, the business owner seeks cooperation, right? They want to be cooperating with others. They don't want to do it their way and do it alone. They're seeking cooperation. They're seeking systems. They want to be able to put systems in place. They want to employ others, right? They don't want to do all the work themselves. Like the self-employed person wants to do all the work, call all the shots, answer the phones, do the marketing, mop the floors, design the logo. They want to do everything. Whereas the business owner wants to incorporate others into their plan and their strategy. The business owners are much more likely to have a very detailed, developed business plan and strategy for execution. Whereas the self-employed, typically they may have a business plan and so forth too, but it's probably a lot more simplified, right? A lot less developed, right? So those are some of the primary distinctions between those. And the investor is motivated by ROI, right? A return on investment. The investor wants a return on investment. The investor wants to own other businesses, wants to be a owner of the business, but they want to be passive owners, right? Not an active owner like a business owner who actually designs the business and the business plan and implements the systems. Okay, so that's what I want to speak about the cash flow quadrant. Give me a moment.